Welcome back to the Wardrobe of Woe, where today we're going to be discussing the Disciples of Tzeentch battle plan and all of the craziness that the Changer of Ways can put into them. First up, we have Tzaangors. They have a space stat line of 6-inch move, 5 bravery, 2 wounds, and a 5-up save. They have a variety of melee profiles. Some of them get access to a Savage Greatblade, which has 1 attack, 1 reach, 4s and 4s to hit and wound, 1 rend, and 2 damage. Most of them will have access to Savage Blades. It has 1 attack, 1 reach, 2 attacks, 4s and 4s to hit and wound, no rend, and 1 damage. And all of them have access to Vicious Beaks. 1 reach, 1 attack, 4s and 5s to hit and wound, no rend, and 1 damage. And they have a plethora of unique abilities, giving them kind of a mess to look at their War Scroll card. The leader in the unit gets a +1 to hit on all of his melee attacks. 1 in 5 can be a mutant, giving them an additional attack on the Blade's weapons. 2 in 5 can have the Great Blade weapon. And then 1 in 10 can have a banner. Now this is kind of unique. They can, if the banner is still alive, they can pick an enemy unit within 18 inches of the Tzaangor unit. And for every wizard, including your own wizard, which you're Tzeentch, you should have a lot of wizards, that are within 9 inches of the Tzaangor unit, you roll a dice, and for each 4-up, the enemy you targeted suffers 1 mortal wound. 1 in 10 can also have a horn, which lets them run and charge, giving them a fairly wide threat range. If they're near an Arcanite hero or a mortal hero, pretty much, they get a +1 to wound, which is, it's not bad considering they have a fairly below average wound characteristic, or to wound characteristic. If the unit has more than 9 models, they get +1 attacks to all of their melee weapons. As for equipment goes, they have the options between an Arcanite shield or dual blades. The shield gives them a 6-up ward if the shield bearer is alive, but you must allot wounds to the shield bearers first. So once all those shields are gone, you're out of your ward save. The dual blades give them a +1 to hit with their Savage Blades weapons. Their battlefield role, Tzaangors are Tzeentch's only dedicated melee unit alongside Tzaangors Enlightened, which are kind of like Tzaangors Plus. They're kind of meh. But they really are there to screen your mages and missile units as well as be your one big threat in melee. If you're wanting to maximize the effectiveness of Tzaangors, I'd run them in blobs of 10. Since if you go beyond that, their low reach will start to give you diminishing returns on their value. I'd keep them near your wizards so you can make use of that banner ability. It could come in pretty clutch if there's a hero or some other unit that you just need to plink off and throw some dice at. In terms of which equipment to use, I would go with the dual swords, but that's a personal preference choice. Next are the Kairic Acolytes. They are your rank and file mortal units. They have a stat line of 6-inch move, 5 bravery, 1 wound, 5-up save, and they can cast once and unbind once in your hero phase. They have 2 melee profiles, the Cursed Glaive, which is kind of scary. It has 1-inch reach, which is weird for a glaive, 1 attack, 2 for the leader, and then 4s to hit, 3s to wound, 1 rend, and 2 damage. And everybody else gets Cursed Blades, 1-inch reach, 1 attack, 2 for the leader, 4s and 3s to hit and wound, no rend, 1 damage. Now they all have access to Sorcerer's Bolts. It has an 18-inch range, 1 attack, 4s to hit, 3s to wound, no rend, and 1 damage. They also have access to Gestalt Sorcery. This is the only spell they can cast. It has a 9-inch reach, so if there's another Kairic Acolyte you'd like to give this buff to, you have a 9-inch reach for that. It has a casting value of 6, and if successful, it gives a +1 rend to the missile weapon. Some of their unique abilities is 3 and 10 can have the Cursed Glaive. 1 and 10 has the Dark Arts Scroll, which gives them a +1 to cast and unbind. 1 in 10 can have the bird you see in the front of that picture that deals 1 mortal wound whenever an enemy wizard casts a spell within 18 inches on a 4-up. Similar to the Tzaangors, they have access to the Arcanite Shield or the Dual Blades. For these ones, I would say the Dual Blades outshine the Shields so much. You reroll failed hits instead of just adding 1 to hit. So it increases their damage significantly. These guys are a bit funky. They're a bit of a hybrid unit, so I would consider them skirmishers. You want to keep them somewhat close to the enemy so you can harass them with missile units and then finish them off in melee if you feel comfortable doing that. They're not particularly tanky, like most things in the Disciples of Tzeentch's roster. I would take them in squad sizes of 10 at max, but have multiple small squads. I think big squads, you get a lot of diminishing returns. Now here's the big one. These guys are what Tzeentch is kind of feared for. Horrors of Tzeentch. They have a stat line of 5-inch move, 10 bravery, 1 wound, and a 6-up save. They all have a melee profile of Taloned Hands for 1 inch, and the amount of attacks varies on what type of horror it is. You can see the table for that information. Hitting in 4s, wounding on 4s, no rend, 1 damage. And they all have access to magical flames, 12-inch ranged attack, and similarly to the Taloned Hands, the different horrors have access to a different amount of attacks. Hitting on 5s, wounding on 4s, no rend, 1 damage. Their unique abilities, 1 can be an iridescent horror, which is kind of the leader of the unit. 1 in 10 has a horn, which gives the unit a +1 to save. 1 in 10 can have a banner, which in the start of your hero phase, on a 3-up, it gives you 1 fate point. Now, here is where it gets crazy. Before the game even starts, you need to choose between one of these 2 abilities, Split and Split Again, or Petty Vengeance. Split and Split Again is the one you should always pick, unless you don't have enough models, in which case Petty Vengeance is kind of like a participation award. Split and Split Again says that whenever a pink or iridescent horror dies, you replace it with 2 blues. And then for every blue that dies, you replace it with a brimstone. So they die and start splitting into smaller versions of themselves. It's kind of cool to see that on the table, but it is a lot of models. So if you don't have enough, you can do the Petty Vengeance, where whenever a model is slain, you roll a dice. And if it beats the corresponding roll on the chart, it deals 1 mortal wound to an enemy within 1 inch. Now, Horrors of Tzeentch are probably the tankiest unit in the game and the most hard to get rid of, because a unit of 10 pinks has an effective wound count of 40 wounds. Not many units in the game can get through that efficiently. It's just really difficult to get them to go away. So their whole job is to tarp hit and slow down enemy infantry units. If you can just line them up in front of your wizards or whatever your linchpin models are, you can pretty much guarantee that that side is safe. To maximize their efficiency, take them in squads of 10 to 20. 20 might be a bit overkill, but if you just really want to make sure that that side or wherever you put them doesn't collapse in, then there you go. Horrors are pretty good. They're also expensive, but they're worth the cost. Now onto the conditional battle line units of Tzeentch. These guys are Units that if you have a specific general or if you're running a specific subfaction, you get access to these as Battleline. First up, we have Flamers of Tzeentch. In order to take these as Battleline, you need to be in the Eternal Conflagration subfaction. They have a stat line of 9-inch move, 10 bravery, 2 wounds, and a 5-up save. Their melee profile is fine, but it's not really going to do that much. 1-inch reach, 2 attacks, 5s to hit, 3s to wound, no rend, 1 damage. What you're really getting Flamers for are their Warp Flame. 18-inch reach, 3 attacks, 4 for the leader, 4s and 3s to hit, no rend, damage D3. Their unique abilities are they get a +1 to hit if they're targeting big units, so anything with more than 10 models. And if they are attacked in melee, you roll a dice each time you allot a wound, and on a 5-up, they deal a mortal wound back. So kind of a consolation prize, really. Flamers are really scary. They can dish out a lot of damage. I would say they're pretty important to have in a good Tzeentch list. They're hard-hitting missile units, and you really want to keep them firing. So if you can keep them out of melee, then you're good to go. To maximize their efficiency, I would take them in sizes of 6 to 9. Flamers are some of the best units Tzeentch has access to, and if you take them in Internal Conflagration, which is a subfaction built around Flamers, they are incredibly scary. Next we have Screamers of Tzeentch. These guys must be taken in Host's Arcanum if you want them as Battleline. They have an amazing move characteristic of 16 inches, 10 bravery, 3 wounds, and a 5-up save. Their melee profile is okay. 1-inch reach, 3 attacks each, 4s and 3s to hit and wound, no rend, 1 damage. Their special abilities are if you're targeting a monster, the damage is D3, so it kind of ups that damage factor by a significant margin. And also, if screamers fly over an enemy unit, you roll a dice for each screamer in the unit that you moved, and on a 5-up it deals 3 mortal wound or a D3 mortal wounds. So these guys, you want to be moving them around a whole lot. They are just there to be fast. And if you absolutely have to take them into combat, target monsters. They are cheap and very fast. Think of them as a light, very light cavalry. I would take them in squads no bigger than 3 to 6. 6 if you really want to build around screamers. They are just great at using that massive move characteristic to fly over enemies on their way to damage whatever you're trying to run them into. Lastly, we have the Burning Chariot of Tzeentch. So for this to be Battleline, you need to have a Fateskimmer General. It has a move characteristic of 14 inches, a bravery of 10, 6 wounds, and a 5-up save. It has a plethora of melee profiles. All of them are kind of meh. It's more about volume of dice than anything. The Flaming Maw has a 2-inch reach, 4 attacks, 5s and 3s to hit and wound, no rend, 1 damage. The Blue Horror Jabs have a reach of 1, 3 attacks, 5s and 5s to hit and wound, no rend, and 1 damage. And the Lamprey Bite, 1-inch reach, 6 attacks, 4s and 3s to hit and wound, no rend, and 1 damage. And similar to the Flamers of Tzeentch, the Burning Chariot is all about the missile profile. The Billowing Warp Flame has an 18-inch reach, a massive 6 attacks, 4s and 3s to hit and wound, 1 rend, damage D3. They kind of have access to all of the abilities that the Flamers and the Screamers have access to. They have the +1 to hit their Billowing Warp Fire with when targeting models with more than 10 or targeting units with more than 10 models. They have the melee damage bounce back on a 5-up. The Lamprey Bite does more damage to monsters, and if you fly this unit over a unit on a 2-up, it deals D3 mortal wounds. These guys are awesome. They combine the best parts of Flamers and Screamers into a very versatile unit that is pretty good right now. They have great versatility. They can pretty much do whatever you need them to do. They're a little squishy and easy to kill, so just keep that in mind when you're charging it into melee or analyzing your opponent's threat ranges. To maximize the efficiency of burning chariots, you can take them in pretty much any size squad you want. They're incredibly flexible. Top lists tend to take at least 3. If you want them to be in one unit of 3 flamers, then you can totally do that, or you can spread them out into 3 units of 1, and that will give you a lot of map pressure and coverage. And that is the last Battleline unit for the Disciples of Tzeentch. Tzeentch is one of the better factions as of right now, and their Battleline kind of reflects that. They have some pretty awesome options. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing or liking or disliking. And if you have any ideas for future videos or concepts you'd like me to go over, please leave it down in the comments below.